Well, good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're doing well. If you are just tuning in, I'll give everyone a few seconds to warm up and tune in. My name is Goldie Gamari, host of The Goldie Show, a show where I go live on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 12 noon Eastern to talk about the pressing issues of the day with respect to the Middle East, politics, radical Islam, and of course, Islamic terrorism. Big shout out to our members and of course the mods. Just a quick note for our members who are watching this live stream. Make sure you go check out the members only message board. I just put up a post and I'm basically asking for your feedback on what things you want me to talk about next week. So, you know, one of the benefits of being a paid member of my YouTube channel is you get direct input, access to me, and of course we have members only message boards. So if you are interested in being more involved in the channel, if you are interested in supporting me, supporting my message, you're welcome to join and become a member, and then you get to see all of our posts and have direct access to me. So with that, I just want to, I guess, get to the topic of the day. And you know, the reason I'm going back to this is because obviously radical Islam is a big problem, and it's growing more and more. And part of the reason that a lot of people who aren't familiar with Islamic terrorism and radicalism, part of the reason that they're sort of confused about all of this is because the radical Islamists are using language such as resistance or freedom or whatever the case might be, you know, words that are attributed to positive things. They're using those words to describe their violent, aggressive behavior. They're using words like, you know, victim. They're calling themselves the, you know, the occupied, you know, whatever the case might be. Meanwhile, those of us who are from the Middle East know full well that they are in fact the colonizers, they are in fact the invaders. There's a reason that the vast majority of the Middle East and North Africa speak Arabic. It wasn't by accident, it was through colonization, right? These are just the hard truths, and it has nothing to do um, with religion or anything like that. It's just this is the reality, right? This is history. This is fact. You cannot deny it. And yet, what these invaders and colonizers do is within North American uh, discourse and dialogue, and also European as well. So pretty much, I would say within like English discourse and dialogue, um, they bank on people not knowing the real history of the Middle East, not knowing how things truly are, and they bank on people's ignorance to push their radical ideology. And if you push back or criticize, they accuse you of Islamophobia, right? And again, like, um, I cannot play this video enough, right? This video here from the Sheikh of the United Arab Emirates, the Foreign Affairs Minister of the United Arab Emirates, right? Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed. Like, for those of you who watch my channel, you guys know I pretty much share this video almost every other show because it's just so critical, right? And guys, remember, so the United Arab Emirates is a Muslim country, okay? Muslim country, Muslim majority. This gentleman here, he is a Muslim, and here he is warning the West in 2017 about the threat of radicalism. Right? This was almost 9 years ago now that he said this, and everything that he said 9 years ago is now coming to pass because those of us who are from the Middle East, we know the signs, we see the signs, we're calling out the signs. But yet, we are being attacked as Islamophobic by the same people who are instigating the violence, not just in the Middle East, but in North America as well. So let's just watch this and pay attention to what he's saying.
And let me say this in English so you can understand what I'm saying.
I have translation.
No, I know you have translation, but I just want to make sure you get it right. There will come a day that we will see far more radical extremists and terrorists coming out of Europe because of lack of decision making, trying to be politically correct, or assuming that they know the Middle East and they know Islam and they know the others far better than we do. And I'm sorry, but that's pure ignorance.
Right? So pay attention to those who know what they're talking about. Listen to them, listen to their experiences. Last episode, we heard an interview with Bridget Gabriel from over 20 years ago. That was an interview that she had 21 years ago in 2004. And for those of you who were with me during that live stream, or for those of you who watched it afterwards, I commented and I said everything that she said 21 years ago, like if she had that exact same interview today, nothing that she said would change, right? So we're going to go now to Ayaan Hirsi Ali. I've shown her speeches before, but this is a relatively new one. This is from last year. So this is from the Triggernometry podcast. So Ayaan Hirsi Ali is a Somali-born human rights activist, writer, and former politician. To escape an arranged marriage, she sought political asylum in the Netherlands at the age of 23. In her early 30s, she renounced the Islamic faith of her childhood and began identifying as an atheist, becoming an outspoken critic of Islam in the wake of the September 11th terrorist attacks. In late 2023, Ayaan shocked many by announcing her conversion to Christianity. She has recently launched a new platform, Restoration, which aims to unite and equip those who want to restore the confidence and institutions of the West. So we are going to now go ahead and play this podcast, and let's see what Ayaan has to say. And guys, remember, so she grew up Muslim. She grew up in Somalia, right? So a Muslim society. And she does not hold back when she's talking about the extremism that is prevalent um, in the society that she was raised in, right?
I think we're in a worse place today than we were in 2001. And so it is for me a bit of a nightmare that Europe is resembling the sorts of streets and places that I left. When you have a scenario where violent, radical white supremacists face off with radical Islamist jihadis, then it's not Europe anymore.
How do you deal with it without becoming the thing you don't want to become? Ayaan, Hirsi, welcome back to the show. So good to have you back. I don't want to waste any time at all. You are someone who's been talking about one issue for a very long time, which was Islamism and Islam. And the other issue about which you're increasingly talking about is Christianity and the role of faith in society as well. I want to start with the first of those two because since the days after 9/11, which feels like it was a different world, when it was a different world, you've been trying to raise the alarm. You've risked your life. Friends of yours have been murdered because they were talking.
One of the things I want to point out as well is that a lot of the younger people who are supporting Hamas and supporting the fake Palestinian cause and supporting Islamic terrorism, and they're labeling it as like resistance or whatever other nonsense they want to label it as. Many of them were born after 9/11, right? And so they never experienced that. They don't have any understanding of it. For those of us who witnessed and experienced 9/11, I mean, I was 16 years old, and I remember sitting in school, and then the news came, and it was just absolutely horrifying, right? And what was even more horrifying to me is when the news of 9/11 hit, certain groups were out there celebrating. Let me pull it up for you. Like, and these were the same people who celebrated the October 7th terrorist attack, guys. Okay? Like, here, let me show this to you. So, like a lot of these young people who are supporting the fake Palestinian cause have no idea that these same Palestinians were celebrating when 3,000 Americans were murdered in an Islamic terrorist attack on US soil, right? Like, how that just shows you how bad the indoctrination is. Like, guys, watch this. This is from Fox News, okay? This is Fox News, and it's available on YouTube, right? So you just search it up, and it says hate on 9/11. Footage of Palestinians celebrating the attacks aired on CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News.
Atmosphere, the V sign for victory being displayed in East Jerusalem today among jubilant Palestinians that the United States had been subject to this attack. What are we to make of that, Jennifer? Are we to, Yasser Arafat may issue this condemnation. Look at this. We're seeing people applauding, clapping, smiling, happy to know that thousands of Americans have died in this sneak attack. And there you see a V for victory sign held up to the camera. What are we to make of that, and what are we to make of what about what Yasser Arafat said today?
The United States blamed by some Palestinians for its ongoing support, as it is seen, of Israel in this conflict, in this Middle Eastern conflict. However, while some Palestinians were taking to the streets in apparent celebration, one youth was quoted as saying, as he received a sweets handed around in celebration, "This is a sweet from Osama bin Laden," he said.
Pat Dawson.
Back to you.
Pat Dawson, thanks very much. We have some videotape, I understand, that we're going to show you from the West Bank. These are Palestinian celebrations in the wake of Tuesday's terror attacks in the United States. Apparently, Palestinians took to the street chanting, "God is great." People were throwing candy, distributing candy to passersby. The U.S. government obviously has
Did you hear that? One of them was yelling Aloha Akbar. Did you catch that, guys?
Distributing candy to passersby. The U.S. government obviously has become increasingly unpopular, particularly in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, because Palestinians feel that the U.S. government has sided with Israel. One man, Nawal Abdel Fattah, wearing a long black dress, threw sweets in the air, saying, actually that's a woman, pardon me, saying she was happy because, quote, America is the head of the snake. America always stands by Israel in its war against us. Meanwhile, Yasser Arafat emerged to speak with reporters.
There you go, guys. There you go. Palestinians celebrating 9/11.
Story atmosphere.
Right? I mean, just watch these images, guys, right? A lot of the young people, a lot of young Americans today have no idea that when 9/11 happened, Palestinians were celebrating that Islamic terrorist attack. I mean, even if, okay, let's say even if, you know, they, how do I put this? You can oppose someone politically, okay, without celebrating their death, right? Like a normal, civilized human being, right? If I have a disagreement with someone over something, okay, that doesn't mean that if something bad happens to them, I'm going to celebrate it by dancing and chanting and passing out sweets. No, I would feel bad for them because they're still a human being, and I have empathy. And so, just because we have a difference of opinion on politics, it doesn't mean that I should celebrate their death. But that's exactly what these Palestinians were doing on September 11, right? No empathy, no nothing, right? Innocent women and children were murdered by Islamic terrorists on September 11, 2001. And these Palestinians are throwing out the V and, waving the Palestinian flag, right? And then they did the exact same thing on October 7, right? These are the people that young Americans are now supporting. Like, these are the people that young Americans think are victims and are oppressed, or whatever other nonsense, right? Like, this is how bad the infiltration is in Western countries, in the United States in particular, right?
About the same.
Because these young people have absolutely no idea that they are hated by these Palestinians, right? They've been brainwashed, and now they've become the useful idiot for these Islamic invaders and these jihadis, right? I mean, just look at New York. Look at New York. Look at who they voted for. They voted for a guy who, in his 9/11 speech, instead of speaking about the victims of 9/11, he spoke about Islamophobia. This is how they get you. It's through this gaslighting, right? They twist the narrative, and then all these young people fall for it. And some of them have been so indoctrinated that if you try to, show them these videos of Palestinians celebrating, they'll either think it's fake, or they'll think Palestinians are justified, right? Like, there are literally young Americans out there who are so indoctrinated that they believe the Palestinians are justified in celebrating their murder. And then I think to myself, like, how stupid can you be? Do you think that if you were in Israel on October 7, they would have spared you? You would have been one of the first people to go. Like, it's insane. But anyway, so that's why this is a big deal, guys. This is like, you have to take this threat seriously. Let's see what Ayaan Hirsi has to say. Oh.
Where are we in relation to that issue in Western Europe, United States, the West more generally?
Well, thank you very much for having me, Fast. It's lovely to be here again, I think for the second time. Mm-hmm. Where are we on the threat of radical political Islam? I think we're in a worse place today than we were in 2001. We've spent trillions of dollars and a lot of blood. And I think I'm coming to the conclusion, what is wrong with our Western leaders? Do we have some kind of curse on us that prevents us from seeing the determination of the radical political Islamists who want to spread their message, which ultimately is the establishment of an Islamic state based on Sharia law? So initially, with 2001, the news broke with those Islamists who wanted to accomplish the objective of establishing an Islamic state through violence. We took passenger planes, they knocked down the Twin Towers, they were on their way to knocking down the White House, and they managed to knock a wing of the Pentagon, and they didn't want to stop this. They wanted to use jihad as a means of shock and awe. And we, I think, got trapped by, if you remember it, you're probably too young to remember that, but it was quite spectacular. And it was history-changing. And the reaction from the United States and the rest of the West was to meet them with force. Because of the military supremacy of the United States of America, the rest of the West, it was relatively easy to subdue and eliminate the structures of Al-Qaeda, to bring down Osama bin Laden as their leader. And when out of that group, a new group, through al-Zarqawi, the Islamic State emerged and hijacked territory, captured territory in Iraq and Syria, we did the same thing again. We were confronted with this determination of these groups to use brutal force, and they were met with military deterrence. They were removed. There is no structure called the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria anymore. But what over the years we have failed to see is the other side, the Dawah side. So not the jihadists, but within the Islamist political groups, there is in my view, much stronger, more insidious, more sinister group, which tries to expand and reach that objective of establishing an Islamic state through dawah. And dawah is basically the plan. It is to bring Muslims, those people who identify as Muslim, to transform them from just religious people who identify with the faith, but who are not political, into political tools for the objective. And then take it one step further and convert non-Muslims. And on top of that, to Islamize institutions. It's a long-term plan. It's gradual. There is a hybrid form. There are some people within the Islamist circles who say we should use the gradualist means, and then when the opportunity is right, we should use force. And so all of these three flavors, if you will, of Islamizing society, or working towards this objective of a Sharia-based society, be it local, regional, or global, they exist, they're expanding, and we are standing by and watching this happen in traditionally non-Muslim territories, in traditionally Christian or Judeo-Christian societies. We've seen them make attempts like this in India. Again, watch the pushback there. In China, the way the Chinese government is dealing with Islamist sedition is absolutely abhorrent. And that is something we in the West can only condemn. We do not want to take our Muslim communities and put them in camps and enslave them, torture them, rape them, sterilize them. These are against every principle we believe in.
I have a comment from Yabs. She has been through so much. Oh yeah, I have nothing but respect for that woman, and I'm usually an a-hole. Oh wow. Yeah, I have a lot of respect for Ayaan. She's been through so much. So many death threats. She had to escape the Netherlands there. yeah, like it's just, but you know, it's unfortunate, but this is typical of anyone who speaks out, right? Even myself, like what I have been through, like my past, and you know, the current death threats that I get, right? Like I have to be very careful as well, and that's why you don't see a lot of people speaking out because it is a very, very real and legitimate threat to our lives because these people are violent, right? These are the people who yell Allah Akbar and chop people's heads off, right? These are people who legitimately believe that killing infidels is their Allah given duty. So yeah, it is scary, and I have a lot of respect for Ayaan. Phenomenal woman, very, very brave, and you know, everything she says is just always like spot on.
And looking at that extreme of what the Chinese Communist Party is doing to the Uyghurs, and then looking at the other side of, you know, when the Islamists use violence, we're going to go after those individuals who use violence and their organizations and put that down, but do nothing else about the spread of the ideology. I think we have opened ourselves up for the establishment of a huge infrastructure of dawah. And so it's like a cancer. The Islamist message and the agents of dawah, the Islamists who are pushing it, are in our education system. They have their own schools and Islamic centers and mosques and madrasas. They've now infiltrated universities. They are in political parties. And so through perfectly peaceful and legal means, they have established themselves. And here we are sitting back and watching this. And I think one of the most shocking things you see today in 2024 on our streets is this chanting of genocidal slogans at Jewish communities in Europe, in the United States, in Britain, in France, in Germany. For the Jewish community today, it feels like it's the 1930s. And this is Islamist-driven anti-Jewish propaganda. And so I find when I first came in here, I said, oh goodness, I'm being mic'd up again to talk about the same things I was talking about in 2001. Don't we ever learn? You know, my first experience on camera was in the Netherlands. It was a program called Rondom Teen, where there was 2 long benches full of members of the audience who speak. And there were young jihadi men snarling at me. And back then, my friend Naima Tahir, who I think is still in the Netherlands. And she and I were educated in the Netherlands. Our backgrounds were Muslim, and we had come to accept and admire the principles and the values of the country we lived in. And we were there sitting and defending them, and these guys were really snarling at us. And I look back to that moment, what she and I were talking about, and over time, many other ex-Muslims and peaceful Muslims have joined us. And it's the same thing. And the problem is just getting bigger and bigger. And
Ayaan, let me just, first of all, can I just fact check you? We're not too old to remember 9/11, sadly.
But thank you for the compliment.
But thank you for the compliment. I remember it very well, and I think it was clear that the world changed fundamentally at that moment. I suppose, you know, we've seen in the UK only in recent days the election of clearly, I mean, people who stand for the Green Party, a local councillor who, on being elected, give his first speech, which he ends with the words Allah Akbar, Free Palestine, etc. Nothing to do about the local council that he's elected to represent.
This is a win for the people of Gaza who have been We will not be silent. We will raise the voice of Gaza. We will raise the voice of Palestine. Allahu Akbar.
Guys, so if you didn't catch that, this guy, okay, this like Islamist, this is his victory speech when he became the mayor of a city in London. I think it's like Birmingham or something. What the heck does municipal politics have to do with the Middle East? Right? Like that's not even your mandate. That's not even your mandate. First of all. Second of all, even if it was, like, what the hell? You got elected to be a British politician and to put England first. Does this look like this guy is about to put England first? Guys, I was a politician for 7 years, okay? Um, when I was a politician for 7 years, I was a Canadian politician, and it was my responsibility to put Canada first, and that's exactly what I did, right? I still raised awareness about Iran and human rights violations in Iran by the Islamic Republic, but I did that in my spare time. Okay, like that was something I did when I was not, officially working as a politician. Um, at no point in my campaign, because I did 2 elections, right? I ran 2 elections. At no point in either of my campaigns did I ever talk about Iran or the Middle East or anything like that, right? Like my election campaign was focused on my mandate, which is, healthcare, education, like the local priorities I had for the community, right? Like one thing that I wanted to do, one of my goals was to build schools. And within the 2 terms, so within 7 years, I managed to get funding from the province to build 15 schools. Okay, so within 7 years, I worked my butt off to secure funding to build 15 schools in the area that I represented, which is pretty much a record. Like I don't know of any other politician in Ontario who managed to get funding to build 15 schools in 7 years. Okay, so like these are some of like the local accomplishments that I had as a politician because I was putting my constituency first, right? Like that is what people voted for me to do. They voted for me to represent them and their needs and to be their voice, right? And that's exactly what I did. Even in the Parliament, in the Ontario Legislature, my focus was all on things dealing with Ontario. Anytime I spoke about Iran or raised awareness about Iran or anything like that, which I did a lot of, but that's something I did in my spare time, right? Like when I was on the campaign trail, or when I was out somewhere talking or giving a speech or something, I never did this ever, ever, right? Like this to me, guys, this is horrifying. This to me looks like an invasion. Not looks like, sorry, this is an invasion, right? If just listening to his horrifying speech, by the way, it's obvious that he was not voted in because of his local priorities or what he wants to do for the Birmingham or Birmingham or whatever city he's the mayor of, right? He obviously got voted in by a bloc, right? Like, so I guess like I don't know, the Muslims or whatever voted for him because he campaigned on freeing Gaza. How the hell is a mayor in some UK city going to free Gaza? But this should scare you guys. How is this British any like this looks like this looks like a victory speech from someone in Pakistan or Bangladesh, right? Like let's just listen to this again. Like to me, like again, as a politician, I'm watching this and I'm just like, what the hell were people thinking, right? And one of the reasons that I did not run again, okay, because I ran for 2 terms, I was a politician for 7 years. One of the reasons I did not run again is because I decided that I had accomplished everything I wanted to do locally, but now I wanted to move on and I want to focus on Iran and human rights and Islamic terrorism and things like that on a full-time basis, right? And I knew that it wouldn't be fair or even like ethical to be a Canadian politician and not prioritize Canadian issues, right? Like I decided to step aside and become a private citizen again so that I can prioritize Iran, for example. That's why I have the flag of pre-Islamic Iran behind me, right? If I was a Canadian politician, I would have the flag of Canada behind me. This guy, I don't see any British flags here. I don't see the flag of the UK here. I see Palestine symbols instead. I see a keffiyeh instead. But I don't see anything here that shows me that this is England. All I see is a Palestine flag. Guys, this guy was running to be a mayor, and instead of having the British flag, he has the flag of Palestine behind him. This is what an invasion looks like, guys. Watch this again. Like, it's just, this is wild. And he's not even like wearing British clothes. He's wearing like Islamic clothes.
Etc. Nothing to do about the local council that he's elected to represent.
This is a win for the people of Gaza who have been We will not be silent. We will raise the voice of Gaza. We will raise the voice of Palestine. Allahu Akbar.
And I just think there are all sorts of other markers.
If you guys think that's multiculturalism and diversity, you guys need to wake up. That is not multiculturalism and diversity. That is invasion.
That people can see what you're talking about with their own eyes. And from the people are very afraid of talking about this issue, but behind closed doors, everybody knows what's going on. To what extent have our policies on mass immigration contributed to where we are? Or is it more that when people do come, we fail to integrate them, assimilate them? Like, how are we here?
So in my experience, again, to go back to those, for me, early days when I started to participate in this debate and say, look, here's what the threat is and what it looks like. The first obstacle, I think, to a broader insight was the members of the elite, politicians, academics, journalists, who said, you know, oh, you poor thing, you traumatized little girl from Somalia, you don't understand, you know, we're this open society, so we're going to approach this the way we've been doing things for a good long time, the sophisticated lot. And
you know what, that's such a good point there, because those of us who do speak out, we get talked down to by, you know, the Westerners, let's say, right? And that the same treatment that she gets, many of us get too, right? Like, you have these like woke lefties or whoever, these progressives, and when we tell them, when we warn them, that's exactly what they say. They say, "Oh, you're traumatized. You don't know what we're talking about. We know what we're doing. We know what we're doing. Let us tell you," right? Like they, for some reason, they've decided to disregard the voices of people like Ayaan, like Bridget Gabriel, like myself, like others who speak out. They disregard our voices because they don't like our narrative, because our narrative doesn't fit with their agenda. And you know, Yavs, I saw your comment where you said multiculturalism is having Indian food with your Chinese friends. 100%. Like, to me, that's multiculturalism. What we're seeing right now is pretty much it's societal suicide.
And that was through consensus. And the prevailing philosophy at the time was multiculturalism.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so the idea was, if we give a little, they will give a little. And together we will go through this where they adapt and we establish this beautiful multicultural.
Yeah, except the problem is Islamists will never give a little, because if you give a little, then they see that as a sign of weakness, and then they demand more and more and more and more, and they will never actually give in return. So if you think you're like negotiating and you're going to meet in the middle, that's absolutely not the case. The more weakness you, like the more you try to appease them, the weaker you're going to appear to them, because they don't view appeasement or negotiation as a sign of like working together. They view negotiation or appeasement as weakness, and then they'll just push you as far as they can.
Societies. Immigration was a part of that debate, where as we were having those conversations all over Europe, it was, well, assuming that this multiculturalist, consensus building, bridge building, sophisticated, wonderful way would work, would be, just from a rational perspective, just from a numbers perspective, wouldn't it be practical to stop immigration, integrate or assimilate as the word assimilation wasn't used, it was integrate. Assimilation was considered to be an insult to the Muslims and to the immigrants. It had to come from both ways. In any case, why don't we take the lot who are already here, get to that utopia of multiculturalism, and then slowly you could talk about having more immigrants coming. But that's not what in the end happened. What in the end happened was those who had come and their children who had been radicalized in this dawah infrastructure, the mosques and the madrasas and in Europe, they continued to broaden their parallel society. I don't know how else to describe it. They have sort of Sharia-light ghettos, and those were allowed to thrive. But at the same time, the borders were also flung open through the asylum and refugee system. So now you have the opposite of what was the desired outcome, which is a group of mainly imams and other radical Islamist elites who have captured the hearts and minds of Muslim immigrants and their children, who are saying, do not integrate, do not assimilate, reject the values of the host country. And then everyone who comes in, they're the ones in town, they're the ones who bring them into the mosques and radicalize them. So you have this paradox where there are refugees from Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Sudan, Somalia, who are not at all Islamist. They're fleeing war-torn countries, war-torn because of Sharia, by the way. And they come into the UK, France, Sweden, Germany, etc. And that is where they are taught to become, through dawah, to become radical Islamists.
Ayaan, and do you think part of the problem here is that Islamism is so different from the way Western people see the world that we really can't understand it? And as a result of not being able to understand it, we can't comprehend and intellectualize the dangers that it poses.
The answer is yes and no.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have an experience in Western Europe and in America with the intolerance or the rise of intolerant ideas, talking about National Socialism, for instance, and the ideas in America that were used to defend the institution of slavery and segregation. We've come to see that those were absolutely horrible, abhorrent ideas, and we've rejected them. And part of showing that we are atoning for the past is to the way we deal with radical political Islam. We recognize it for what it is. There is plenty of scholarship now in every country to show that radical political Islam is totalitarian, it is anti-human, it's anti-freedom, it's anti-woman, it's anti-Jewish, it's homophobic. And they show us over and over again. You know, when the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria was established, they proceeded actually to carry out what it would be like to live in an Islamic state. So we know that. We know it not only through scholarship, but also what they readily show us. When Hamas on October 7 went into Israel to attack the people that they hated, the way they treated them, part of that was defended with Islamic scripture or with the Islamist ideology. So it is no secret at all to any of our Western leaders, regardless of where that leader, moral leadership, political leadership, scholarship, any kind, it's absolutely clear to us what radical Islam entails. But somehow we can't get ourselves disconnected from this idea of atoning for our past sins, the sins of slavery, of colonialism, of causing the Holocaust. And now here we are. I remember a conversation I used to have openly with the mayor of Amsterdam, where he plainly said, we should not treat Muslim minorities in Holland the way the Jews were treated in the 1930s. There is this constant reference, and in my view, absolutely wrong reference of the totalitarian, terrible ideologies of Europe and America, to say the only way to atone for it is to give a free pass to this new totalitarian ideology. By the way, Islamism is not, it's not like, you know, the Jews who were persecuted in the 30s. There was never a Jewish empire. Jews never held slaves. There were Islamic empires who held slaves and who segregated people and who continue to do that. And yet somehow we...
Yeah, and we've spoken about that, guys. Remember, so when you, if you've watched my previous episodes, the one where I speak about Matt Walsh, and we speak about the Ottoman Empire, which of course had many, many European slaves as well, right? Like, and the Barbary Corsairs that were based out of like North Africa, they actually would go and raid European villages and, you know, capture white people and take them and sell them as slaves in the Middle East.
We find ourselves inhibited, frigid when it comes to seeing this problem and dealing with it appropriately while we still have time and while there are still, you know, we have options that are open to us.
Why do you think it is that we're so reticent about talking about this problem and then actually dealing with it and tackling it head on?
So what I can report to you is I was a politician actually operating within a proper liberal democracy and a parliament within in that context. And if I give you an aggregation of all the arguments, every person on either side, we don't have two, one aisle with two sides in Holland. We had several parties. It's the proportional representation system, so it's a bit more crowded. But all of them were saying, look, we have a constitution, and this constitution guarantees the following things. It guarantees the freedom of religion, the freedom of association, the freedom of speech. We have schools, religious schools in the Netherlands paid for by the government. And so if an Islamist wants to open a school to indoctrinate, we know he's going to program children with the totalitarian ideology of Islamism. He gets not only a license to open this school, but he also gets money. So we knew all of these things, and we can't stop it because our laws forbid us from doing anything other than if they cross over to the line of violence, then we will go and pick those individuals up, we'll surveil them, if possible, we'll bring them to court. There's really not much else we can do. In which case, these constitutions, they sort of turn into, you know, what one American scholar right after 9/11 called the Constitution is seen as a suicide pact.
And we're talking about indoctrination here. And one of the most worrying things is it's not just refugees who are coming from war-torn countries. It's they're indoctrinating our youth as well. A perfect example of this is Shamima Begum, a girl who left the UK at 15 to go and join ISIS.
So the case of Shamima Begum is very, very interesting. And I think I followed it a little bit in the UK. And what I see again is a very legalistic conversation that is very much beside the point. Should this young woman come back to the UK? Should her citizenship be revoked? It was revoked. Should she get her citizenship back? No, she should not. That's where the conversation is stuck. When actually the conversation should be, what on earth was going on in Bethnal Green? Who are the grown-ups who programmed her and the other young women and the other young people? And why are we not holding those grown-ups who programmed her accountable?
That's a very good point, right? So what Ayaan is trying to say here, guys, pay attention. So she's talking about the case of like these girls who were indoctrinated, and then I think they left to join ISIS as like ISIS brides, and then some of them are now like trying to come back, and the UK is like, no, you stay in, you know, whatever refugee camp there with all the other ISIS prisoners or whatever. And, you know, so she's saying that the debate right now is whether or not these people, these young women in England or wherever in Europe were radicalized and sent over. The debate is whether or not they should come back. But what she is trying to point out is that the young women who were radicalized and convinced to leave a free, democratic, open, fair society like the UK, leave that and go become the bride of an ISIS Islamic terrorist, right? They were indoctrinated. It's not like these women just woke up one day and said, I'm going to leave my country, go to a third world Islamic hellhole and become the fourth wife of like some guy, who's like an Islamic terrorist and murders infidels for a living, right? It's not like someone just woke up one day and decided that. These women were indoctrinated. There's clearly some sort of network or institution or something in the UK, right, that is creating the space for these women to come and become indoctrinated, right? So what she's trying to point out is the conversation shouldn't really be about whether or not that girl is coming back. We should instead be focusing on how the heck was she indoctrinated in the first place? Who was responsible for that? Let's go after those people, because those people are obviously a threat to society, right? Those people are bad actors. Those people are radicalizing young people and bringing them over to the Islamic Jihad cause, right? So that's what she's saying. And, she makes a very good point there, because the conversation about whether or not these women should come back, that's a conversation about the symptom, right? But she's saying, rather than focusing on the symptom, we should be focusing on the cause. Because if you just want to treat the symptom, but you don't treat the cause, well, the symptoms are just going to happen over and over again, and it might even get worse, right? If you want to, think of like a cancer patient. If you want to treat the cancer, you don't go after the symptoms, you go after the cancer cells. That's what she's trying to say here. She's saying, why are we not focusing on the people who created the conditions to radicalize these British women and convince them to go and join an Islamic terrorist group and become the third or fourth wife of, I don't know, Muhammad or Abdul or whatever? And no one's talking about that.
For the fact that they did this. I remember it was a few years ago watching
Let me go back a bit.
father
Pay attention to this part.
Should be revoked. It was revoked. Should she get her citizenship back? No, she should not. That's where the conversation is stuck. When actually the conversation should be, what on earth was going on in Bethnal Green? Who are the grown-ups who programmed her and the other young women and the other young people? And why are we not holding those grown-ups who programmed her accountable for the fact that they did this? I remember it was a few years ago watching her father give interviews where he was sort of throwing his hands up in the air and saying, I don't know, she ran away. And I think the dads of the other young women were doing the same thing. And I remember thinking that his story didn't add up. He surely must have known what was going on with his daughter in his own household. Because really, if you are growing up as a female, as a girl in a Muslim household, everybody knows what you're doing, what your plans are. And so my suspicion was all the grown-ups around these girls encouraged them and helped them and programmed them to go and join the Islamic State. And now here she has gone through all of these horrors, and she's left sitting there holding the ball.
Yeah.
And all the grown-ups have gotten away with it, and our society, the British society, the American society, and so on, they're not going after the grown-ups. They're not going after the people who are propagating the ideas and filling these young hearts and minds with these ideas. When I was in the Netherlands, I was in Parliament, I was threatened by, I think he was a 14 or 15-year-old student of some Islamic school. He and his mates, they sneaked away to Chechnya to try and fight. And they came back saying it was too cold for them to fight, which at the time everyone thought was hilarious. But they continued on this trajectory of radicalism. And the teenager was demonized. The teenager was held responsible. The teenager is the one who was surveilled. It's the teenager who was eventually, I think, sent to prison, but not the grown-ups, not the teachers, the parents, the adults who had groomed these young hearts and minds. And that, I think, in the end, is what is wrong with our societies. It is this hatred, deep-seated hatred of who we are. And part of this atonement is pathological because it's really taking us to a place of collective suicide.
Ayaan, when we're going to talk about Christianity later, but when you wrote your article, you identified 3 key threats to the West, which is something I've been talking about as well. Great power authoritarianism, Islamism, political radical Islam, and woke ideology. What you're talking about with the self-hatred is the woke ideology. We've talked about Islam, and the great power stuff is obvious. You mentioned that we've got to do something while we still have time. Do we still have time? This episode is brought to you by the Monk Debates, where the world's leading thinkers debate the most pressing issues of our time. The next Monk Debate could not be more timely. The motion is anti-Zionism anti-Semitism? On the 17th of June, Triggernometry favourite Douglas Murray and international legal expert Natasha Hausdorff will debate former MSNBC anchor Mehdi Hassan and Israeli journalist and critic Gideon Levy. For just $9.99 a month, you can stream this debate live and also get access to over 15 years of incredible debates on hot-button issues like public trust in the mainstream media, the existential risks of AI, and the rise of populism. Go to www.monkdebates.com to become a member and open your mind to a world of great debates. And now, on with the show.
I think we have more time in America than we do in Europe. And I say this because, number one, because of demographics. You just mentioned a counselor, someone who won an election peacefully through the normal means and became the counselor. And I think we are seeing this all over Europe because of the birth rate crisis, because of the immigration crisis, that if a Muslim party or Muslim parties were formed, official ones, not the Green Party and the Labour Party, but real official ones that call themselves the Muslim Party, I mean, there are these scenarios where they could easily win elections. There are already stories in Germany of young people, German, white, non-Muslim kids thinking, feeling left out and converting to Islam. The effort, the dawah, to convert non-Muslims into Islam and to Islamize institutions is relentless and it's strong and it's not met with a counter story or a counter force. So I think that we have more time in America if we wake up now because of the crisis we're witnessing on universities and schools. We're in New York now, and today there is a day of rage. The whole Middle Eastern problems are transported here. And so if Americans were to say through the ballot box, we don't want this, we understand what it is, we don't want this, we can turn this tide, I think America could turn this tide. I worry about Europe. I worry about Europe also because of the rise of radical.
So this interview was about a year ago. I think that she's come out more recently, and I think she's even said, like, in her opinion, Europe is gone. Like a year ago, she was worried, but I think more recently, she's actually said that, like, she has no hope left for Europe. Apparently, like it's that bad.
Very radical, extreme right-wing parties. And when you have a scenario where violent, radical white supremacists face off with radical Islamist jihadis, then it's not Europe anymore. In that the scene you have, there's a scene of chaos and violence, and add a splash of Antifa and the radical organized communist organizations, and legitimate authority of people in the center who are elected to keep these sorts of things at bay fails to work and you get a balkanization, you get a state of chaos. And in a state of chaos, if you look at other societies where this has happened, somehow the radical Islamists come on top.
Hard to disagree with anything you said. I suppose the question is, one of the things that is just incredible is, for example, the UK recently banned Hizb ut-Tahrir.
Yeah.
A group that was banned like in every Muslim country in the world. The UAE had, the foreign minister of the UAE, he had this viral clip talking about warning Europe about terrorism and extremism, whatever. And it very much goes to your point, which is, I suppose the question ultimately is, you've identified this problem that we have, but without going full authoritarian and saying, well, some religions are better than others and therefore not allowed, or things along that line.
Yeah.
How do you deal with the problem where, as you say, people may not be committing any crimes by indoctrinating people into a worldview, and then those young people end up committing crimes, but telling them, believe in this or think this isn't a crime. How do we, if we were to try and deal with it, how do you deal with it without becoming the thing you don't want to become?
And I think here's where time is so important. The thing you don't want to become is either you fall into this chaos of a cycle of violence where all these extreme groups take over. Main Street, that's what you don't want. You don't want them taking over the levels of power. That's the kind of world where I come from. And why also I'm terrified of some of these developments, because if you go to some of these ghettos where informal Sharia is applied, that's what it looks like. You have to visit these places to see for yourselves some of the transformation that's going on the streets and neighborhoods and towns of Europe. So how do you
Sorry, Ayaan, before you get into that, what do you mean by the transformation of the towns and cities, of some of the towns and cities of Europe?
If you travel around Europe, when I was doing this work, this book, Pray, and this is back in 2020, I think matters are even more serious now. You see things that you really don't see. You can't just get it from reading about them or watching them in documentaries. You've got to go to these places, see the sights for yourself, hear the sounds, smell the smells. And what you see is, streets that look like they could be in Algeria or in Somalia or in Lahore in Pakistan. And not, for instance, one of the salient things was not a woman in sight in parts of Paris. And when I obviously couldn't go and talk to some of these people, but the woman who was working with me would ask, where are all the women? They were chased out of the cafe. And this chasing out of women out of a cafe is very un-European. That's a transformation in my view, because when I came in 1992, the opposite was true. And so it is for me a bit of a nightmare that Europe is resembling the sorts of streets and places that I left. And I was telling them, it was 1992, I was 22, I was covered up. And when my Dutch friends asked me, why are you frightened? What's wrong with you? I would say, no, you don't go out, without someone escorting you. You don't go out without covering up. And they would think I was an alien. I had come from some other planet. And in 1992, that was true. I had come from a different planet. But now that planet that I had come to in Europe, many neighborhoods resemble where I left. And that just happened within 3 decades. And so you can see when I talk about transformation that it doesn't take that long. And so there were really some very serious scholars, one who comes to mind, Walter Lockyer, Bernard Lewis, and Nick Eberstadt, the American demographer. They were all telling us, my husband, Neil Ferguson, back in the day, that if this demographic developments continue and we don't do anything about assimilation, or there is going to be this flip in 2040, 2050, that's not too far away. So,
thank you for the shout out, Johnny. Hope you're enjoying the live stream.
Europe really has a lot of catching up to do. The situation in Europe is very alarming, and it is totally possible to have Sharia law established. It's now established, soft Sharia in neighborhoods, but established through the ballot box.
So come back with me to how to preserve a liberal society given this threat without resorting to illiberalism in response.
I think one of the things we can do, what's great about open societies are always at risk of subversion, all sorts of subversions. But I think one of the strongest characteristics of an open society is its ability to learn from its mistakes and to learn from others. And so part of what we need to do is really to go back to the philosophical table, if you will, and define or figure out a way of defining seditious ideologies. Radical political Islam is an ideology that says as loudly as it possibly can, we want to completely abolish the existing order, and we want to replace it with our own order. That is a political theory. That's a political philosophy. It's not a religion as defined in the American Constitution or any of the other European constitutions. And how you deal with that definition, that is, I think, where we ought to go now. And this is not something we civilians can.
Major Charles Martel is spinning in his grave. Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely see that. For those of you who don't know, I can't speak. Charles Martel, he lived around 688, what was it, to 741. And he actually gained a victory against the Muslim invasion of Aquitaine at the Battle of Tours. So he's credited as an important factor in curtailing the spread of Islam in Western Europe. Here, guys, let me just pull that up for you so you can see. Here you go. I got to remove the video first. So this is Charles Martel. You can look him up. And yeah, so here. He gained a victory against an Umayyad invasion of Aquitaine at the Battle of Tours, and Charles is credited as an important factor in curtailing the spread of Islam in Western Europe. Along his military endeavors, Charles has been traditionally credited with an influential role in the development of the Frankish system of feudalism. So yeah, I mean, I could definitely see where your comment is coming from about how Charles Martel is probably spinning in his grave. Because yeah, 1400, like if Charles Martel was alive today, he would not recognize France. He would be like, everything that I did 1400 years ago to preserve, France and French culture was pretty much for nothing. Yeah. And if he was alive today, he would be canceled by the jihadis for, Islamophobia as well. Because, if you call out their jihad, you're Islamophobic.
It is the people we've elected to govern us to get together and do this and say, is political Islam really a religion the way we define Christianity or Judaism or Hinduism or Buddhism? Because these other religions are not organized and they're not loudly telling us that they're coming to replace us. That's number one. Number two, and I know this debate is ongoing in the UK, the asylum, it's international treaties in general. International treaties, especially asylum and refugee conventions, the convention in 1951 and then the European Council of Human Rights. These international laws have to be reviewed, and we have to adapt to the reality of today, not the reality of 1951 or even in the 1960s. It's today. And the conclusion, and if you ask me what is it that we should be doing, that we're not doing, is to review and repeal these international conventions or withdraw from them or come up with something else. People were talking about a national human rights code or law that goes back to the basics of human rights, and that is individual-based human rights. So I think from the perspective of thinking about these things and the scholarship, just the data gathering, we have all of this. We need just to get out of this passive state that we've adopted.
Well, I agree with you on that. And you say it's the job of elected politicians. Sadly, and this really is sad, a lot of them watch this show and listen to people like you, and they're actually looking for answers in places like this, believe it or not, which is not necessarily a good thing if you think about it, but nonetheless. And I still don't feel that we've got the answer, because you say it's not a religion that we're worried about, it's a political ideology. But in a liberal society, we allow people to express political views. I mean, Americans until recently were very proud that they had Jews who tolerated the Nazis marching through particular towns, and this was considered an expression of freedom of assembly and freedom of speech. So do we want to be a society that bans political views that we don't like? That's the question, right? And I don't disagree with your analysis.
There's a difference between a political view you don't like versus a political view that wants to completely dismantle you and take over, right? We have to be very, very clear about this. A political view that you don't like could be, you know, how you want to fund the social welfare system, for example, right? Like you're having conversations on how to achieve political goals within that particular political system, right? So the debate and the conversation you're having is within the framework of that political system. So, you know, me as a politician, right? I was a politician for 7 years. I was part of the Progressive Conservative Party, right? There were other parties. There was the Liberal Party. There was the NDP Party. We have differences of political opinion on how to go about achieving a goal. Now, typically, you know, usually the end goal is the same, right? So we all want to, you know, for example, let's say we all want to eradicate poverty. Okay, so that's the end goal. But you know, the conservatives might have a, you know, one way of going about it. The liberals will have another way. The NDP will have another way. You know, we can disagree on which way, right, we think is best. You know, me as a conservative leaning, you know, politician, of course, you know, I think the conservative policies make more sense. But that doesn't mean that, you know, the other opinions should be banned. So no, political discourse and difference of political opinion shouldn't be banned. However, when you're dealing with like political Islam and Sharia law, that's not a difference of political opinion. That's a difference of political system entirely, right? Because here is the current political system, right? This is the framework of the political system. And then here you have Sharia law, which is an Islamic political system. And the purpose of Sharia law is to completely annihilate and wipe out the existing political system and take over and impose their political system entirely. So, if you have a political system and this is how you run your society, it makes sense to want to preserve that system, to preserve that context, to preserve that framework. And it makes sense to want to ban any other ideology that poses a threat to the pre-established political system. This is what you guys need to understand, okay? Sharia law or Islamic law or political Islam is not a difference of political opinion. It's a difference of a political system. Sharia law cannot exist with any other political system, because Sharia law, Islamic law, is based on the word of Allah, right? Is based on the Quran, based on the word of their God, and that supersedes anything and everything. And so that's why when you have these radicals, these Islamists who come to your country and they say we want Sharia law, right? You have to listen to the quiet part. The part that they are not saying is, you know, we want to dismantle your system in its entirety, and we want to impose Sharia law on everyone because we believe that, you know, we have a responsibility to Allah to spread our political ideology, and everyone must either convert and follow our political ideology, or they are our enemy and we must execute the infidels. Okay, that's in a nutshell. The problem that Westerners make is when they hear people say we want Sharia law, the ignorant Westerner, right? Because, you know, in Western society, people are normal, people are civil. You know, in Western society, there is the understanding of, you know, let's meet in the middle, let's compromise, whatever. So when an Islamist comes to your country and says we want Sharia law, right? The Westerner hears this as we want to coexist. We want Sharia law for ourselves, and we want to coexist within your system. That's the mistake that Westerners make, right? Because they interpret we want Sharia law as we want coexistence. No. The lesson here for you guys is when they say we want Sharia law, that means Sharia law for everyone, and that means getting rid of your political system in its entirety and imposing their political Islam on you. So do I think that different political ideologies should be banned? 100%, absolutely. If that political ideology poses a threat to the pre-existing political ideology, if that political ideology is meant to dismantle and take over and supersede, 100% you should ban that political ideology, because if you don't, you're basically committing civilizational suicide, right? You're allowing the enemy in, and that enemy is going to eventually take over. That's the difference, guys. You see that? So you know, wanting Sharia law is not a political opinion, okay? It's a different political ideology that wants to take over. A differing political opinion, again, would be like, you know, the conservatives and the liberals have a different political opinion on how to eradicate poverty, right? And so the difference of political opinions are within the political framework, the pre-existing political framework, and they're not going after the political framework. Like, no one's going out to like eradicate the Constitution or you know, or you know, whatever, right? That's the difference, guys. You have to understand that. So no, you know, political opinions should not be banned, not at all, 100%, no matter how much you disagree with it. But someone who wants to impose Sharia law, that's not a political opinion, guys. That's not. That is a completely different political ideology that wants to destabilize, eradicate, and take over.
I'm just trying to think, how do we deal with the threat without allowing it to change who we are in a way that means that we're no longer defending a liberal society because we're not liberal anymore?
We're not liberal anymore, no. I think what we are seeing is a shrinking of the options we have. So 20 years ago when we were saying, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, when we were saying, look, we are a liberal society, we have these laws, we should be able to, our society should be able to withstand these kinds of shocks. That was one thing. But the, again, rational thing to do was to say, we're not going to change our laws and our structures and our attitudes, but we are.
Did I not just say that? That would have been the rational thing to do, right?
Going to help them change. And that hasn't happened. And so now we've pushed ourselves into a corner where we are either going to become, we will have to get used to living under Sharia law. As many, by the way, people, native people in Europe, and increasingly in America, who haven't asked for it, are forced to live with it because of the reckless immigration policies of our, the people we elected to govern us, the majorities we elected to govern us. And so the options we have are shrinking. And I think we are now in a place where we have to say, it's okay for people to hold whatever views they wish to hold. But the licensing, and we've talked about the license to open schools, the license to open mosques, the license and the charity statuses, the money that these people get, who have is clearly seditious. And now we understand, we know what we're talking about now. I think that could be stopped. I think we could deport, if they're not citizens, we could pass laws to stop this.
Like, so she's talking about all of these, like, you know, religious cultural schools or whatever that are opening, and, you know, indoctrinating young people in Sharia law. She's saying we should get rid of that. We should not have that in America, right? Like, stop the licensing, shut down the schools, you know, deport anyone who's not a citizen, get them out of here. Do not allow Sharia law to grow in your societies, because that will lead to destabilization, right? Because if they are not here to change or assimilate, they are here to impose, and, you know, we're now seeing that.
I said the strongest characteristic of an open society is the ability to learn from our mistakes and from others. There are other countries, you mentioned the UAE, you did not mention Saudi Arabia. You know, Singapore is another country. There are a number of countries who are confronted, these Saudi Arabia and UAE are Muslim countries, who are confronted with this particular flavor of sedition.
Mm-hmm.
Pay attention to this part, right? So I've talked about this as well before, right? A lot of this radicalization that you're seeing, okay, it's coming from the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood is a terrorist organization. Basically, they want to establish a global Islamic caliphate. The Muslim Brotherhood is behind all of the pro-Hamas, pro-Palestine movements. The Muslim Brotherhood is a big reason for why all these young Americans have been indoctrinated into thinking that Islamic terrorists are freedom fighters. She just mentioned Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Okay, Saudi Arabia and UAE are of course like Muslim countries, right? I mean, Saudi Arabia is the birthplace of Islam, and even Saudi Arabia is curtailing these radical ideologies, right? Because even Saudi Arabia recognizes that Sharia law poses a threat to their system. And that's a Muslim country, right? Like Saudi Arabia, it's not exactly the bastion of human rights, right? Like other religions, like there's no religious freedom in Saudi Arabia. But even the Saudi Arabian Muslims, the sheikhs recognize that radical Islam, what we're seeing spread in North America and in Europe, is a threat, right? The Muslim Brotherhood is classified as a terrorist organization in Saudi Arabia. The Muslim Brotherhood is a terrorist organization in the UAE. The UAE, another Muslim country governed by Islamic law, right? But not necessarily Sharia law, because they've modernized, they've reformed, right? And the UAE also bans the radicals, right? So all these like radical schools and mosques and whatever that are popping up in North America and in Europe, they're banned in the UAE and Saudi Arabia and other Muslim countries in the Middle East, right? Because those countries recognize the difference, and they recognize the inherent threat that, you know, Sharia law poses on the stabilization, on the stability of their countries. So pay attention to this part, because this is important.
UAE. You did not mention Saudi Arabia. You know, Singapore is another country. There are a number of countries who are confronted, these Saudi Arabia and UAE are Muslim countries, who are confronted with this particular flavor of sedition.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been warning us for years and years, saying, you guys are committing suicide. The way you deal with this problem is wrong. And I
remember, that's the video that I showed you earlier, guys, the video from the Sheikh, the foreign affairs minister of the UAE, right? Let me play that for you again. This is the video, right? This is one of the videos, one of the examples that Ayaan is referring to. This is from 2017. The foreign affairs minister of the UAE, Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed.
And let me say this in English so you can understand what I'm saying.
I have translation.
No, I know you have translation, but I just want to make sure you get it right. There will come a day that we will see far more radical extremists and terrorists coming out of Europe because of lack of decision making, trying to be politically correct, or assuming that they know the Middle East and they know Islam and they know the others far better than we do. And I'm sorry, but that's pure ignorance.
There you go. So there's the foreign affairs minister of the United Arab Emirates, a Muslim man. And in 2017, he was warning Europe about the threat of radical Islam and how it's going to be a bigger problem in Western societies because Westerners are not going to be able to properly deal with it because they don't understand it and they're worried about, political correctness and, Islamophobia and all that nonsense, right? So that's what Ayaan is referring to when she says that these leaders have been warning.
It's time that we now start to heed what
So this is the warning,
we are
right?
confronted with this particular flavor of sedition.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been warning us for years and years, saying, you guys are committing suicide. The way you deal with this problem is wrong. And I think it's time that we now start to heed what we've been told. Now, that is on the elite level. On the mass level, I think you'll just have to go back to, what is the, what do we have that can inoculate young hearts and minds against the message that the radical Islamists are spreading? We have a very beautiful old counter message, and it's called Christianity. And the Christian message, for those who are seeking spirituality, who are seeking a meaning and a purpose in life, and who end up in the wrong hands, and they end up with the wrong lot, whether they are Islamists or the woke. I think the churches, the institutionalized, established churches, have a better, more effective, and more homemade. It is very much in sync with their own identities. I think on that level there's plenty of alternatives. It's just that there is no one pushing it. If you go back to Shamima Begum, the only people who are trying to talk to Shamima Begum, fill her head with and her identity and answer maybe her questions. What is it to be a good person? How can I help society? Is there something bigger than myself that I can sacrifice my life to? The people who are giving these answers are the Islamists, it's the woke, it's just the wrong lot. What about, good old boring Christianity, if you want to put it that way? Love thy neighbor. There is an existing story. I know you've spoken to Jordan Peterson and others, but the West has a lovely story to tell. It's a story of life. It's a story that celebrates life. It's a story that celebrates merit, that celebrates art, that celebrates equality, that celebrates and protects women. It's a beautiful story to tell if we want to tell it.
Let me recommend a product that we use all day, every day here at Triggernometry Towers.
Look, going online without ExpressVPN is like using your sensitive data. It's super.
Still going on? Okay.
.com/trigger and get an extra 3 months free.
Now, back to the show.
Ayaan, do you think we're looking back, because I think Constantine was as well, we love the whole new atheist movement. We don't need God. We have logic, science and rationality. What do we need God for? God's something that the peasants used to do in the early 20th and the 19th century and all the other ones.
Yeah.
Do you think looking back on it now, that was a grave error of judgment?
I've come out to say it was a grave error of judgment. And in fact, I remember feeling just massive rage when the American Association of Atheists took away Richard Dawkins. They had honored him with a prize, and they took away the price because he wasn't giving in to the woke demands. And so atheism went woke. The American Association, that is the adoption of a new nihilistic religion. And I know we talked a lot about humanism, but again, humanism, number one, is born out of Christianity. It is Christianity saying, I don't need to believe in God and I don't need to read the Bible because every kind of moral good that you've extracted out of those religious teachings, I can now have it in a secular way. That's great, but you haven't established anything close to an institution that is competitive when it comes to what radical Islam and the other organized religions, whether young or old, are doing. And so I think right now the ball is in their court, the humanists' court, to say, well, then get up and get going. But as they start going, maybe we should use the existing organizations that we have. I think we touched on Jonathan Haidt. I focus on radical Islam and its spread and the threats that it poses. But another big threat to our society is what is happening to the youth, this explosion in anxiety, depression, mental health illnesses, addictions, overdose on fentanyl and other drugs. And I think Jonathan Haidt made the remark that he sees this particularly, and he was talking about young girls who are susceptible to suicidal ideation, etc. And he said he sees this problem much stronger within liberal secular households and much less so in religious households. I have seen this with the radical, when you look at radical individuals that are attracted to radical Islam, the solid Muslim house, if you grow in a Muslim household and the Quran is already familiar to you, the teachings are already familiar to you, already know the distinction between, political and non-political Islam, those ones tend not to go with political Islam. And so there is something in general about religion filling the spiritual needs and the need for meaning in human life, whether that religion is Judaism or Christianity or Islam or Buddhism or something else. And so I think it was wrong of the secular West to throw out Christianity as quickly and as completely as we did it.
It's also as well, you talk about, of course, spirituality is important and so on and so forth. Science isn't going to keep you warm at night, and particularly when you're faced with, things like failing health, failing health of loved ones, etc., etc. But something else that religion gives you is a sense of community.
Yes.
I don't find it a coincidence that, Muslims call each other brother and sister and so much. There's a real comfort to that. We need community. And that's something the new atheists, I don't think, factored in really. So the good depiction, I think, I would give of the new atheists was a whole number of new atheists I met who had read Infidel and would come to me and say, I come from a household or I come from a community where I was subjected to religious intolerance, almost as extreme or just as extreme as the one that you went through. And so in reacting against that, it was out with religion and in with now this new community of atheists. But as a new community of atheists, I think we assumed quite a lot. I think we assumed that simply by leaving behind religious intolerance, you will come out and you will shed superstition, you will appreciate reason and humanism, and you'll flourish. There's really no need for the establishment of a community or
an institution or that it is all there. You will know to find it because you're now guided by reason. And I think we fail to see that that's not how things work. And for a lot of those people who had left their intolerant religious backgrounds, they fell into a void, into loneliness, into the lack of community. And the people who came from agnostic, atheist, or non-religious backgrounds are also finding themselves in modern times falling into the same, lack of a sense of community, lack of a sense of purpose, and seeking and getting lost. And so I think that with my friends who are still atheists and who still think that atheism is reason can protect us from all of these threats. I think I underestimated, and maybe even that's the wrong way of saying it. I simply didn't see it. I only saw the negative, bad side of religion. And I also made the mistake of going along with the declaration that all religions are the same. And in fact, it is that's absolutely untrue. It is all religions are not the same. There are different religions that have gone through different developments, and some religions are quite superior to others. A religion that tells you that it's all about death. All you have to do is sacrifice yourself for the sake of Allah, and in the end, what awaits you is paradise.
I mean, she makes a really good point there. Amir, thank you for the super sticker. Appreciate that. Thank you for supporting the channel. Ayaan makes a very good point there about how, like I don't want to get too much into the religious side, but yeah, like everything about Islam is basically like, death and martyrdom and glorifying death and glorifying martyrdom, right? Like even the whole concept of jihad and murdering infidels in order to get into heaven and get your 72 virgins, right? I mean, it's all connected. The violence, right? Part of the reason there's even a radical element within Islam is because of those who literally take the book by the word, right? And they believe that one of the fastest and easiest ways to get into heaven is to conquer non-Islamic lands and murder infidels while yelling Allahu Akbar. It's just a fact. Like it's fact. We see it everywhere. I mean, you saw it on October 7 when Hamas terrorists and even Palestinian civilians, right? Palestinian civilians were murdering people and yelling Allahu Akbar. You're seeing it in Nigeria with the Muslims genociding the Christians and yelling Allahu Akbar. You're seeing it in Sudan. You saw it with ISIS militants murdering Yazidis in Iraq. It's what they do. It's what they do.
In its extreme form, that religion is a cult of death. Because you just have to look forward to dying because the reward is going to come after you die. That's a very, very different religion that has in its foundations that the founder of the religion died so that you can live and that your sins are forgiven. And so the story of rebirth and the story of forgiveness and the story of love and the story of love thy neighbor, that's a very radically different story from the story of Islam. And so it is, I think it was a bit juvenile to promote the idea that, all religions are bad, all religions are stupid, and also to negate perhaps the good side religion has.
So she's talking here about her conversion from Islam to Christianity, right? So she left Islam because of the violent, murderous element of it. I guess she didn't like that, and then she was an atheist for a long time because of her experience with Islam. She just thought all religions are bad. And I'm going to go back and I want to replay that because that's really important, guys. She thought that all religions were bad because of her experience with Islam. That's actually something that Iranians can certainly relate to. less than 30% of Iranians today are Muslim. I would say maybe even less than 20%. But we do know that it's at least less than 30%, and that's because an independent study was done 5 years ago, almost 6 years ago now, in 2020, where they surveyed Iranians inside of occupied Iran, and 3 out of 10 Iranians identified as Muslim. So there's a reason for that, guys. There's a reason for that. The Islamic dictatorship occupying Iran and Sharia law has turned off Iranians, and many of them have left, the vast majority, and many have, many are agnostic, right? Agnostic or atheist, and it's very, the reason that they are agnostic or atheist is exactly what Ayaan is talking about here, is about because everything that Iranians experienced under the Islamic Republic in the name of Islam and religion is just so horrible, right? And again, like the Islamic Republic is a culture of death. It's a culture of martyrdom, right? Like they impose that death cult ideology on Iranians, and Iranians want absolutely nothing to do with it. And so because their experience has mainly been this 7th century Sharia law version of Islam, not only have many left, but many have said we want absolutely nothing to do with any sort of religion whatsoever, because it's only ever been a negative experience, right? And I'll make a note of this. I'm happy to talk about this and expand on this more in another episode. But this is why many Iranians are just completely agnostic or atheist, because they're just so sick and tired of Islam, and because they don't have any experience with any other religions, they just assume all religions are bad. There is, however, so this was how Ayaan started out, right? So when she left Islam, she was like, I just don't want anything to do with religion. I'm sick of it. It's all bad. There's nothing but negatives in there. But then eventually, when she found out about Christianity and what Christianity stands for, she realized, okay, like this is not like Islam at all. In Islam, they glorify death and martyrdom, whereas in Christianity, it's about celebrating life. And Jesus died so you could live, which again, completely different concept and ideology from Islam. And so she's basically sharing her journey from Islam into converting to Christianity eventually. And guys, what's really interesting is that right now Christianity is the fastest growing religion in occupied Iran. Yep. We don't know the full numbers because the crime for apostasy is death, and the Islamic Republic will execute anyone who converts to Christianity. So many Iranian Christians have to practice in secret. There is a very small minority of Christians who practice openly, but this is where context is important, guys. So you're going to see a lot of like these Islamists, right? They'll be like, oh, there's Christians in Iran, and they're allowed to practice, right? But they just throw out that fact without any context. So here's the context, the background info you need to understand Christianity in occupied Iran. Your religion is pretty much on your passport, I think, or it's on something, right? Like the Islamic regime knows like who's Muslim, who's Christian, who's Jewish, all of that. They have that data. And so if you were a Christian prior to the Islamic Republic taking over in 1979, then you're allowed to remain Christian. Of course, they want people to convert, but it's complicated. Those Christians are still heavily under supervision, right? And many of them are basically used as token Christians, right? So these Christians, you will see them like having a picture of the Ayatollah in their church or wherever the case might be, because they're forced to do it. Because if they don't, then they could be jailed, and be accused of being a spy and executed, because again, it's an Islamic dictatorship, right? And Christians and Jews and other minorities, the Baha'i have no rights whatsoever. By the way, Baha'i are heavily persecuted. Um, they could be executed at any time for any reason, because according to Sharia law, they're second-class citizens and don't have the same rights. The other thing that people don't point out, these Islamists, when they talk about, oh, there's Christians in Iran, they practice openly and freely. They don't talk about the fact that since 1979, Christians are not allowed to repair their churches. Okay, so since the Islamic Republic took over in 1979, not a single new church has been built in occupied Iran. Many churches have been forced to be shut down due to disrepair. Why are they in disrepair? Because the Islamic Republic does not allow Christians to repair churches. Why don't they allow Christians to repair churches? Because the hope is that eventually there's going to be no more churches left in Iran, right? So that's how they're going about persecuting Christians in occupied Iran. Those are for the people who were Christian prior to 1979, right? And many of those Christians are in fact Armenians. Why? Because in the early 1900, or around the time of the Armenian genocide, when the Turks were genociding the Armenians, many Armenians actually escaped to Iran and found refuge in Iran, right? Because again, prior to 1979, Iran was a free secular country, and everyone lived equally, and all religions were equal. No one was persecuted. So Jews, Christians, Muslims, whatever, everyone lived equally. It was only when the Islamic Republic took over in 1979, and then when they imposed Sharia law, that it turned into the 7th century Islamic hellhole that it is. And a lot of these Islamists also like to claim that Iran has the biggest, largest population of Jews in the Middle East outside of Israel. Well, first of all, that's not something to brag about, because it's only 10,000 Jews, okay? And many other countries in the Middle East have 0 Jews. Why do they have 0 Jews? Because Jews were heavily persecuted and had to escape. Prior to 1979, there was over 100,000 Jews living in Iran. So aside from Israel, the other safe country for Jewish people was Iran. Over 100,000 Jews lived freely in Iran without persecution. When the Islamic Republic took over, they started persecuting the Jews, executing the Jews. They accused many of them of being Mossad agents or spies for Israel, whatever other, the same jihadi nonsense that they put out today, right? And so many Jews, Iranian Jews, actually had to escape. And so now there's, I think, less than 10,000 Jews living in occupied Iran. So the Islamic Republic, if you want to understand Sharia law, just look at the Islamic Republic. And it is a culture of death. It is a culture of martyrdom. All they focus on is death and destruction, and everything is heavily restricted, right? Because it is this cult mindset, and just like any other cult, the reward is in the afterlife, right? Like, think about all those death cults where it's like, okay, it's the end of the world is coming. I think it was like one for the year 2000. All these like various cults that just go on and on and on for different reasons. It's the same thing. It's the same thing with like this extremist Islam, where it's all about you sacrifice your life now for a reward in the afterlife. And if you look at like Muhammad's description of heaven, right, the description of heaven in the Quran is kind of weird. The rivers flow with wine. You can sleep with whoever you want. There's like naked virgins walking around, right? Like, that's a very weird misogynistic sort of heaven. And basically in heaven you can do everything that you're not supposed to do on earth. So it's very weird, right? But anyway, so that's what Ayan's talking about when she's talking about this culture of death, right? And then so she thought all religion was bad, because she thought that all religion just focuses on death and martyrdom and destruction and, killing the infidels and, women being second-class citizens and whatever. But then when she learned about Christianity, she converted. And so that's kind of what's happening in Iran as well, where less than 30% of Iranians are Muslim. Many are agnostic or atheist. However, there is a growing movement of people converting to Christianity and secondly, Zoroastrianism as well. So those are the two fastest growing religions, but it all has to be done secretly because the crime for apostasy is death. And that's another indicator, that's another clue to you guys that we're dealing with a cult, right? Because I don't know of any other religion today, okay? I don't know of any other like modern day religion where the crime for leaving your faith is not just death, but it's acted upon, right? Like literally people in Iran are executed every day for the crime of, corruption against Allah. It is a very violent, like in its extreme form, like what's happening in occupied Iran. It is an extreme cult-like radical ideology. So let's go back. I want to listen to this again because she's talking about her journey from Islam to Christianity, and her journey resonates with me because this is the exact same thing that I'm hearing from many Iranians, right, who have left Islam and are now, either agnostic or atheist, and some have converted as well, right? So when I show you that statistic that less than 30% of Iranians are Muslim, it's because of this. Like she's had the exact same experience as have many others. Cable, thank you for speaking over this. I dream of seeing an Iran free of oppression. Thank you so much, Cable. I appreciate that. Yes, we are fighting for a free Iran, and I can't wait until Iran is free because once again, we're going to open our doors to the world and we're going to have the biggest party, and all you guys should come and party with us in a free and secular Iran. Okay, let's go back. I want to listen to this part again here.
Death. Because you just.
Here we go.
And maybe even that's the wrong way of saying it. I purpose and seeking and the intolerant religious background community of atheists. But as a new community of atheists, I think we assumed quite a lot. I think we assumed that simply by leaving behind religious intolerance, you will come out and you will shed superstition, you will appreciate reason and humanism, and you'll flourish. There's really no need for the establishment of a community or an institution, or it is all there. You will know to find it because you're now guided by reason. And I think we fail to see that that's not how things work. And for a lot of those people who had left the intolerant religious backgrounds, they fell into a void, into loneliness, into the lack of community. And the people who came from agnostic, atheist, or non-religious backgrounds are also finding themselves in modern times falling into the same, lack of a sense of community, lack of a sense of purpose, and seeking and getting lost. And so I think that with my friends who are still atheists and who still think that atheism is reason can protect us from all of these threats, I think I underestimated. And maybe even that's the wrong way of saying it. I simply didn't see it. I only saw the negative, bad side of religion. And I also made the mistake of going along with the declaration that all religions are the same.
Right. So her experience of just just knowing the negative side of religion, that's the exact same experience that 80 million Iranians have had under the Islamic dictatorship for the last 47 years.
And in fact, it is that's absolutely untrue. It is all religions are not the same. There are different religions that have gone through different developments, and some religions are quite superior to others. A religion that tells you that it's all about death. All you have to do is sacrifice yourself for the sake of Allah, and in the end, what awaits you is paradise. In its extreme form, that religion is a cult of death, because you just have to look forward to dying, because the reward is going to come after you die. That's a very, very different religion that has in its foundations that the founder of the religion died so that you can live and that your sins are forgiven. And so the story of rebirth and the story of forgiveness and the story of love and the story of love thy neighbor, that's a very radically different story from the story of Islam. And so it is, I think it was a bit juvenile to promote the idea that, all religions are bad, all religions are stupid, and also to negate perhaps the good side. Religion has some good things, some good functions, if you will. And that's what we're now witnessing once in the West more than anywhere else when you throw that out.
I just spent about 3 weeks on tour with Jordan Peterson, as you mentioned, hashing out some of these issues. And he brought me over to disagree with him, and one of the things that I kept asking him, and Jordan, he answers in 20-minute paragraphs that don't necessarily address the central core of your question. But one of the things I kept asking him in different ways at different points is, do you believe in God? And we had long back and forth about it. Reading your article about becoming a Christian, I found it very interesting because you said many of the things you've said today. I think your analysis is spot on in terms of a vacuum of belief creates alternative religions like wokeness, but also creates the space for other more forceful religions that have a clear idea of what they're about to come in. What you didn't say in your article is that you believe in God. Do you?
I do believe in God, yes. And I said this to Richard Dawkins the other night when in the dissident dialogues. I choose to believe in God. I found myself in that place of complete disconnection and despair, and struggled with years and years of depression, and tried to do it, the way a good old atheist would do it, by going to science and seeing psychiatrists and psychologists. And I learned a lot from them. I learned a lot about the human brain, the human mind. I learned a lot about addiction and all the rest of it. But if you ask me, now that I've come out of this depression, what exactly happened? I think it was when I surrendered to the idea that, yes, I am undergoing or going through a spiritual, as one of the therapists put it, spiritual bankruptcy. And so I fell to my knees and prayed. And it is only then I felt this sense that something was lifting. And something was lifting because I was feeling connected to something much more powerful than myself. And I don't know how to describe that. And I followed that up with wanting more. And the choice of becoming a Christian, choosing Christianity. Of course, I grew up with Islam, so I know what that holds. And looking at the other, Far Eastern religions, I see some of the wisdoms there, but perhaps too far away from me. But feel very much at home with Christianity and with the legacy of Christianity. And so I'm not ashamed or embarrassed about it, but I do want to emphasize that's a personal and very intimate, if you will, decision. And it's not something that I want to impose on others, or but I'll say, if I see, let me rephrase it. In the past, I would have discussions with people who would talk about the advantages of religion, and I would just laugh at them and go along with people who were saying, they're too weak, too frightened in the dark, too nonsense, that kind of thing. And now I think from my experience, I think there's a great deal of wisdom in there, and that brings us back to a sense of brings me back to a sense of humility. But I am not standing on the streets with the Bible proclaiming the gospel. But
Sorry, I just noticed, I think I forgot to share this one. Working today, but keep fighting. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I hope you have a good day at work. Happy Friday.
all goodness.
I think you would look great in one of those sandwich boards with, with a megaphone.
And a bell.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for public figures to come out and admit doubts, admit the things that they struggle with, I think that's a form of moral leadership that perhaps some of us were too embarrassed to come out and share. And so there is something in, I didn't need any persuasion to say, if you're a young person and you're struggling with the same things, you feel that it's all meaningless. It's okay for you to have these feelings, and it's okay for you. There is a way out. There's a light somewhere there. This is what worked for me. I don't know if it will work for you, but this is what worked for me. I think that is, again, a very Western civilization thing. Instead of punishing people for their suffering because it's deviant, I think the compassionate thing to do is to say, how can we, what can we help, what can we do together to help you get better?
Well, one of the things that I'm really grateful for is, I think, in the one of the benefits of new technology is the ability to have discussions like this. And I think older media, like television, was much more about sharing certainties. You have two people, 5 minutes each, or 3 minutes each, or 20 seconds each, and you deliver your certainty about this. There is. In these conversations, we have the ability, as you say, to actually talk about what it is that you're thinking, why you're thinking it, where you're unsure, what journey you're on, because that's actually, I think, where most people are. I don't think most people live their lives through the prism of 20-second sound bites about their certainty about something.
Yeah.
Most people are in the place of inquiry and openness to ideas, I think. And so it's interesting to me. I suppose the question is, and again, this is something I asked Jordan repeatedly, is, can you put the toothpaste back in the tube? I call my generation the children of Dawkins. How do, but I also sense that a lot of people our age and younger too are in the inquiry of what is meaning, what is purpose, how do we connect to others? And like you say, it's unavoidably obvious and painfully obvious that that vacuum that new atheists were so looking forward to opens up the space for new things to come in that are not even going to be as good as what we had before. I mean, wokeness to me is an awful religion. I mean, one of the worst in many ways. And then also in the geopolitical environment that we operate in and the global environment culturally, we have challenges, we have competitors, and we have to rediscover a strength and confidence in the values of our civilization, or we will go the way of every civilization that has lost its way in the past.
Yeah. So I'll say, if you're a young person and you want to know a great deal about biology, read Dawkins and listen to Richard. He has a great deal of knowledge and wisdom to impart there. If you want to understand,
I just want to say, so I will be playing some of Richard Dawkins' interviews in future live streams. So make sure that you are subscribed to my channel and you have your notifications on, because you do not want to miss those.
the roots of our civilization and how we got here, and the meaning, putting the toothpaste back in the tube. Listen to Tom Holland. And see, both men, very much Western, in fact, both of them have this background in scholarship and taking their scholarships very, very, very seriously. And these are the two individuals, but I think they represent a whole world of a whole civilization that is that managed to dominate the world and to lead the world, because it allows for that. It allows for these different inquiries and perspectives and these conversations. And I think what you were talking about earlier, about the little bit of certainty. You come in and you say your piece of certainty, and then you turn it into a contest with winners and losers. I think that created a sort of polarization of ideas. If you're pro-Dawkins, you can't be pro-Tom Holland, which is, of course, nonsense. And so I think part of it is to bring young people back into the realm of, for me, actually, the realm of reason and spirituality, where they can coexist, faith and reason, where you say, if you're seeking development and evolution and growth on this plane, you go to this end of the library. And if you're seeking it on this end, you go to that end of the library. But the library is full of, that Western library is full of all of this knowledge and wisdom. And I think we've lost a bit of that.
Ayaan, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's always a pleasure. Before we head over to our locals, where our supporters get to ask their questions to you, our final question is always the same. What's the one thing we're not talking about as a society that we really should be?
Restoration.
Which is the title of your Substack, by the way. So I'm glad you slipped that in.
Yeah.
Tell us more about what people can find out there.
I think for many years we've talked about what our problems are, and it's good, and we should continue to talk about what the problems are and diagnose them. But perhaps now that we've come to understand most of them, we should restore our institutions. We should restore, again, the story, the foundational stories, these principles, and celebrate them. And and I want to be a part of that. Restore the relationship between men and women, restore the relationship between parents and children, between the generations. There's a great deal of restoration work to be carried out.
I mean, that is a great mission, and I think we're very lucky to have people of your caliber participating, and we certainly aspire to doing the same. So thank you for coming on, Ayaan. It's a great honor to have you back on the show. And of course, head on over to Locals, where we ask Ayaan your questions right now.
Great. So there was the Triggernometry interview with Ayaan Hirsi Ali. Definitely, everything that she says, so important. So I'm glad that we were able to watch that. And I'm also glad that she spoke about Richard Dawkins, because he is sort of on my list of people where I want to share documentaries and, comment on them. And, we talk about them on this live chat. Unusual, thank you for the support. Appreciate that. Haven't seen you in a while, Unusual. Hope you're doing well. Thank you for that. So I just want to point out as well, guys, for those of you who want to keep the conversation going, I do have members only posts as well. So if you're interested in supporting my channel and helping my channel grow, you're welcome to become a member. I'll show you, an example of what I posted here. So just to give you a sense of the kind of things that goes on in the members only posts that we have. So if you are a member of the channel, I think it's like $10 a month or something, you get access to the members only message board, and you guys are able to provide direct input into what you want to see on the live streams, what you want me to talk about, what you want me to focus on. So for example, here's a post, where I'm getting member only feedback for, what you guys want me to talk about next week. My show used to be daily. Right now, it is only 3 days a week, and there's a few reasons for that. So the first one is I'm working on a book. It's called Pro Tips from an Iranian, A Beginner's Guide to Understanding Politics in the Middle East. You can find it on Amazon. and you are able to pre-order it on Kindle if you like. It's gonna there will be a paperback edition as well. You just can't you can't pre-order the paperback edition yet, but the paperback edition will be available for purchase on December 7 as well. So if you don't like Kindle and you prefer paperback, just keep an eye out on that then, because you'll be able to order that as well just in time for Christmas. This book is not necessarily for people who are already experts on the Middle East. This is for people who are new to the topic, don't really know what's going on, want to understand more. So this is kind of a good, little introductory type of thing. There's going to be more of these books coming out. This is just the first in a series that I'm doing. And I'm going to see how much interest there is. If there is interest from people, then I'm definitely going to do more. For those of you who follow me on Instagram and TikTok and X, you'll know that this book is based off of my Iranian Here pro tip videos, which have gone viral, been shared thousands, hundreds of thousands of times, millions and millions of views. So there you go. There's that. And I know some of you asked me if I'm going to be on tonight. I don't know, guys. I don't know if I'm going to be on tonight. And there's a reason for that. It's the same reason that I'm only right now just doing my live streams 3 days a week. One is because the book is coming out, and I do have to focus on my book until that's ready to go. But two, I'm actually growing. So I have some exciting news. My channel is growing, and this background you see behind me, which is kind of temporary, this is going to change. So as of next week, I'm going to be in a brand new location. The background is going to be a little bit more professional. Really excited about that, because when I actually started my channel, I started live streaming less than 2 months ago. I had less than 2,000 followers, and I think right now I'm at about I'm over 20,000 followers, subscribers on YouTube, and of course the membership numbers are going up as well, and that's all thanks to you guys. So thank you so much for the support. But yeah, so a little bit of growing pains, I guess. But I do plan on going back to do a daily live stream, both during the day and also in the evenings. Just not right now, because there's so much going on that I do have to focus on, getting the channel up and running, the set, the background, and everything. So yeah, for those of you who have been with me up until this point, you guys are the real OGs. You guys have been with me right from the beginning when I started 6-7 weeks ago. With this, it was actually a different background back then. This is not even the first background that I had. So, but yeah, I'm very, very excited about the future. I'm excited about how things are growing and expanding. So yeah, you just have to bear with me for a little bit as I focus on, the expansion and setting up in the new space. But as soon as that's done, I promise you we will go back to doing daily live streams, both during the days and in the evenings. Until then, thank you everyone for joining me, and I will see you all, if not tonight, then next week. Have yourselves a fantastic weekend, and to all of my Jewish followers, Shabbat Shalom. All right, guys, we'll see you soon. Take care.
Thank you.